No one expected much from Liana Torres, the quiet girl with the long sleeves and noise-canceling headphones. So when 5 varsity girls tried to corner her in the locker room after PE, thinking they could humiliate her for sport, they had no idea she'd spent 6 years training with one of the most elite tactical defense instructors in the state. What started as bullying ended with a lesson none of them would ever forget. The humid air inside Brookhaven Regional High's gym buzzed with the chaos of third-period PE. Liana Torres, 16, moved like a ghost through the noise, avoiding eye contact, taking up as little space as possible. It had been 3 months since she transferred from the northern edge of San Antonio, where she'd been pulled from her old school after a traumatic incident her mother refused to talk about. Here, at Brookhaven, she was a blank slate. Just another quiet kid in the background. And she planned to keep it that way. Every morning before school, Liana ran 5 miles, not for attention or fitness, but to maintain discipline. Her uncle, a retired Army Ranger turned private security trainer, had raised her after her father's death. From age 10, she trained with him in a converted barn just outside town. Krav Maga, close quarters defense, controlled breathing under stress. She had never joined a tournament, never bragged, never even told a friend. The first rule her uncle ever taught her: you never use your training to prove something. You use it when there's no other way out. But lately, it was starting to feel like there might not be a way out. Liana had managed to stay under the radar until she accidentally crossed Camila Vega, Brookhaven's star sprinter and unofficial queen of the athletic department. One glancing bump in the hallway was all it took. Camila, flanked by her ever-present circle of varsity girls, had turned with a sneer and muttered, "Watch it, creeper." Liana had apologized, quietly, sincerely, but Camila hadn't accepted it. And from that day on, Liana's life started shrinking. It began with harmless-seeming comments, mocking the way she always wore long sleeves or calling her robot girl for her silence. Then came the locker pranks, hidden shoes, dumped water bottles, accidental elbow shoves during warm-ups. Liana absorbed it all in silence. She kept her head down, kept her promise to her uncle, but her gut told her something bigger was coming, something coordinated, something that would demand a decision. And by the end of that week, they gave her no choice. Liana first noticed the shift during Thursday's PE class. The whispers started before the locker room door even closed behind her. Camila and her crew, Jordan, Tasha, Lonnie, and Grace, all athletes from different teams, all notorious for staying just under the disciplinary radar, were huddled near the benches, fake laughing louder than necessary. Liana kept walking. She always did. But something was off. When she opened her locker, her spare shirt was gone. In its place, stuffed deep inside, was a folded note, yellow, torn at the edges. 2 words in sharp black ink: "Run, robot." She didn't react. She just set it aside, pulled her hoodie tighter, and changed in the same stoic way she always had. Fast, quiet, minimal exposure. But her body was already shifting. Breath slowed, ears sharper. Her uncle called it gray alert, when you're not in a fight, but you might be about to walk into one. 10 minutes later, out on the track, Coach Darnell announced today's activity. Obstacle relays, teams of 5. Camila raised her hand before anyone else. "Coach, we've got a squad ready." Liana's stomach dropped when she saw Camila turn to the rest of the team, and then glanced directly at her. "Can Liana join ours?" Camila said sweetly. "We want to help her, come out of her shell." A few students snickered. Coach Darnell, too busy juggling equipment, didn't sense anything wrong. "Sure, go warm up. You're Heat 3. Liana moved slowly to the group, but her gut was screaming. Something wasn't right. Camila's crew were all dressed like they were going into battle. Knee pads, speed cleats, hair tied back tight. She realized now, this wasn't a relay. This was a trap. They warmed up on the far side of the track, out of view from most of the class. Camila clapped her hands. "Okay, girls, new rule for this heat, full contact. Lonnie smirked. Coach didn't say it wasn't allowed. Grace cracked her knuckles. Let's see if Robot Girl can keep up. Liana didn't speak. She just stood there, breathing slow, remembering what her uncle told her the night after her first real sparring match. You don't start fights, but if they push you past the line, make sure they remember why they shouldn't have. Camilla leaned close, just inches from her ear. You humiliated me in the hallway, new girl. Now it's your turn. That was the moment Liana realized. They weren't going to let her walk away from this without bruises, maybe worse, and they had no idea who they were dealing with. Coach Darnell blew the whistle, and the heat began. It wasn't even subtle. Camilla and her squad didn't just race. They targeted. Liana barely made it 5 steps before Tasha accidentally shoulder-checked her off course into the grass. Jordan missed a handoff and shoved a baton straight into her ribs. Camilla, running anchor, doubled back mid-sprint just to trip Liana during a crawl under segment. The worst part? Coach was too distracted with another group to notice the ambush unfolding right in front of him. Liana didn't cry out, didn't scream. She just kept moving, bruised, limping, hands scraped, but her eyes were changing, calculating. They had planned to break her down with cheap shots and crowd laughter. What they didn't realize was that every contact, every hit, every shove was waking up something she had buried deep since the day her uncle closed the training barn and told her to lay low for now. As the final leg started, Camilla ran beside her and hissed, "Why don't you just quit already? You're embarrassing yourself." Liana didn't respond, not yet, but her stance shifted slightly as she entered the rope wall station, feet planted, breathing even. She wasn't going to finish the relay. She was going to finish this. Liana stood at the base of the rope wall, her hands stinging, knees raw, and heart steady in a way that felt terrifyingly calm. She reached for the first rope, pulled herself upward, and at the top she paused, not from exhaustion, but from the choice that was quietly, surgically forming in her mind. Below her, Camilla barked something about moving faster, freak, while Grace and Jordan waited just below the ropes with cruel grins and feigned patience. Liana had spent her entire life being told not to fight, to adapt, to stay quiet, especially when provoked. But this wasn't some training simulation. This wasn't sparring in a padded barn. This was real. Humiliation disguised as team sport, a coordinated ambush with cameras probably recording from the sidelines, and it was going to keep happening. Not just to her, but to whoever else ended up in Camilla's crosshairs next. Liana dropped down from the rope wall and landed lightly right in front of Jordan. "Move it, robot," Jordan muttered, shoving her shoulder. Liana didn't flinch. She stepped aside slightly, then let her hand flash upward and snatched Jordan's wrist mid-shove. Jordan's expression faltered. "What the?" she started, but Liana didn't wait. She pivoted, redirected the girl's momentum, and used the smallest amount of leverage to send her stumbling sideways into the sand pit. The move was clean, surgical, no wasted motion. Camilla's voice behind her turned sharp. "What the hell was that?" Tasha came at her next, less cautious, charging forward like it was a rugby drill. Liana dropped low, used Tasha's weight and speed against her, and flipped her clean over her hip. The crowd noise started changing, no longer laughter or taunts, but gasps, recognition. Something was happening that wasn't part of the original plan. Grace hesitated, hands up. "We were just messing around, dude," she said quickly. Liana's eyes stayed locked on her. "Then stop," she said, her voice even and controlled. Grace backed off, muttering something about crazy and not worth it, and jogged toward the benches. But Camilla didn't run. She walked forward slowly, hands clenched into fists, cheeks flushed with disbelief. "You think this makes you special?" she spat. "You think flipping people over makes you strong?" Liana didn't move. "No," she said. "Not reacting made me strong, but you decided that wasn't enough." Camilla swung, a wide, angry, poorly timed punch. Liana stepped inside it, blocked with her forearm, and dropped into a clean, practiced sweep that sent Camilla to the ground. Not hurt, just stunned. The kind of takedown you only use when you want to send a message. Liana didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She stood above her with quiet intensity and said, "You came after me. Now you know why I don't chase anyone." Coach Darnell, alerted by the growing crowd, sprinted over, blowing his whistle, shouting for people to back off. But it was too late. The moment had already happened. The crowd had already seen. And in less than 60 seconds, the girl they all thought was harmless had taken down 3 varsity athletes, one by one, without ever raising her voice. Coach Darnell's whistle echoed across the gym field like a warning shot. But Liana had already stepped back, hands raised in calm surrender, palms open. "She attacked me!" Camilla blurted from the ground, scrambling to her feet, her once pristine uniform streaked with dirt. "She snapped! She's violent!" But no one was nodding along. Too many eyes had seen what really happened, had watched Liana move with deliberate control, never once hitting in anger or escalating beyond defense. A few students murmured quietly, others recorded discreetly. Liana saw Alex Huang from her algebra class, standing off to the side, holding their phone not with sensational glee but thoughtful attention. Coach Darnell pulled Liana aside while telling the rest to disperse, his brow furrowed. "Tell me exactly what happened." She did, calmly, clearly, without exaggeration. He didn't say much, but his tone shifted. He had seen enough. Meanwhile, Camilla stormed off to the nurse's office, muttering threats about her mom calling the school board. But the tides were already turning. That night, footage of the confrontation hit the school's unofficial social feed, @Brookhaven Leaks, and it spread fast. But unlike most videos that went viral for the wrong reasons, this one had context. Multiple students posted angles that showed Liana's restraint, the unprovoked contact, and the entire ambush during the relay. The comments flooded in. "That wasn't a fight. That was self-defense. Yo, she moved like a ninja. What did we just watch?" Camilla picked the wrong target this time. By morning, the school hallways buzzed with a different energy. No longer pitying looks or avoidance. Now there was curiosity, respect, even a bit of awe. Liana walked to her locker and found someone had taped a sticky note to the door. For a split second, her gut tightened. But when she peeled it off, it read, "Thank you. A girl who gets it." She didn't know who wrote it, but it meant more than they'd ever know. In homeroom, Alex slid into the seat next to her and said quietly, "That was the cleanest takedown I've ever seen. You okay?" Liana gave a small nod. "Yeah, I think. For the first time, yeah. They're talking about letting you start a self-defense club. PE faculty's bringing it up in their meeting," Alex added, almost amused. "Funny how fast the narrative changes when you show them who you really are." Liana didn't answer, but inside, something began to loosen. For weeks, she'd moved like a shadow, haunted by memories of her old school, old regrets, old violence. But here, now, the story was different. She hadn't fought for pride. She hadn't fought to prove anything. She had just drawn a line, and when they crossed it, she made them regret ever thinking she was easy to break. The days that followed were a strange mix of calm and caution. The locker room, once echoing with giggles and insults, had gone eerily quiet whenever Liana entered. Camilla was conspicuously absent for 3 days, supposedly recovering from a back sprain. But the truth was clearer than any doctor's note. Her image had cracked. Her followers, Jordan, Grace, and Tasha, drifted back into the general crowd, suddenly uninterested in full-contact relays or whisper campaigns. Coach Darnell didn't say much, but during a warm-up the following week, he gave Liana a curt nod, the kind that said, "I see you." But it was Principal McLean who surprised her the most. On Monday morning, she was called to the front office, not for punishment, but for a conversation. "I watched the footage," he said, sliding his reading glasses off and folding his hands. I also read Coach Darnell's report. What you did was measured, tactical. But the bigger question is why you had to do it in the first place. Liana didn't flinch. She explained everything, how it started, what she endured, how she tried to avoid it. She didn't mention her uncle or the training or what she was truly capable of. She just laid out the facts, and for once, someone actually listened. By the time she returned to class, her inbox had a message from the counselor's office. Would you be willing to mentor a few students dealing with peer intimidation? Liana blinked at the email, uncertain whether to laugh or cry. She didn't feel like a role model. She had just survived. But then she saw Marcus, a freshman who'd been cornered outside the library last week, watching her with quiet hope as she passed in the hallway. Maybe it wasn't about being a model. Maybe it was about not letting others think they had to shrink to be safe. Later that afternoon, during PE, Camilla finally returned. Her hair was tied back tighter than usual, her eyes cold. She said nothing during stretches, nothing during drills. But when their paths crossed by the water fountains, she paused, just long enough for tension to settle in the air. "You think you won?" she muttered under her breath, barely audible. Liana didn't break stride. "I didn't come here to win," she replied. "I came here to be left alone." And she kept walking, not bothering to look back. Because for once, she didn't have to. Camila's threat didn't land the way she wanted it to, and she knew it. Over the next few days, her attempts to reclaim her authority were clumsy at best. She laughed too loudly in class discussions, posted cryptic captions on social media like, "Don't mistake silence for weakness," and "Some people need to be humbled." But the likes were drying up. The comments, once full of admiration and flattery, now included phrases like, "Still mad about PE?" and "Maybe don't start what you can't finish." Liana, meanwhile, said nothing, did nothing. She focused on her classes, her breathwork, her nightly training routines. The self-defense club idea gained traction fast. Students from all corners of Brookhaven began expressing interest, not just kids who were bullied. Some were athletes. Some just wanted control over their own fear. When the PE department gave the green light for a pilot workshop, Coach Darnell surprised her again. "If you're willing to teach it, I'll help you run it." That Friday after school, in the auxiliary gym, Liana stood in front of 12 students and introduced herself, not as the girl who flipped Camila Vega, but as someone who once felt helpless and learned to fight only so she wouldn't have to. She demonstrated stances, breathing techniques, situational awareness drills, no fancy kicks, no flashy moves, just clarity, control, boundaries. From the bleachers, Alex filmed parts of it and posted a clip with the caption, "Strength isn't loud. Sometimes it just walks past you in the hall." The post went viral within their school network and beyond. Messages poured in. DMs from students in other districts, comments from parents, even an email from a community martial arts center asking if Liana would consider speaking to their girls' group. She wasn't prepared for that kind of visibility, but this time, it didn't feel like she was being exposed. It felt like she was being understood. One evening, her uncle called and asked, "So you're a teacher now?" with a voice full of quiet pride. Accidentally, she joked. But inside she felt something settle that had long been restless, the knowledge that her strength, once hidden like a secret, was now helping others find their own. And the best part? She hadn't needed revenge. She hadn't needed to destroy Camila. All she had done was refuse to be small, and let that refusal speak for itself. By the second week of the self-defense workshops, something unexpected began to happen. Students, who had never even spoken to Liana before, started treating her like someone they could trust. One girl, Natalie, who had once laughed during one of Camilla's pranks, now lingered after class just to ask questions about how to de-escalate a confrontation without fighting. A boy named Drew, lanky and nervous, admitted he was scared of taking the bus because of an older kid who kept pushing him. Liana didn't lecture. She didn't tell them what to feel. She showed them how to move their feet, breathe through fear, and make eye contact like it meant something. And with every class, the gym grew more full of students, of confidence, of something she hadn't seen much at Brookhaven before: mutual respect. Even the faculty took notice. A guidance counselor stopped by during a session and later emailed Principal McLean to say, "There's something happening in that gym I haven't seen from any club or team all year." As for Camilla, she showed up just once, stood outside the gym doors, arms crossed, as Liana demonstrated how to break free from a wrist grab without aggression. Their eyes met through the glass for a split second. Camilla didn't come inside. She just turned and walked away. Whether it was guilt, shame, or simply the realization that her control was gone, Liana didn't care. She had stopped keeping score, because the victory was no longer about what happened that day on the track. It was about everything that came after: the ripple effect, the way students began walking with straighter backs, speaking with more confidence, checking in on each other instead of joining in on cruelty, the way the gym, once a place of fear and forced performance, had become a space of growth. That was the real transformation. And for the first time in her life, Liana didn't just feel safe. She felt powerful, not because she could fight, but because she no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. The girl they had ganged up on wasn't just standing, she was leading. The change didn't happen overnight, but it was undeniable. In the weeks following Liana's quiet stand, the atmosphere at Brookhaven began to shift in subtle but powerful ways. Students who once stood on the sidelines during bullying incidents now started to speak up, even if only with a glance or a quiet, "Hey, that's not okay." A few teachers, previously numb to the undercurrents of student conflict, began to pay closer attention, noticing who lingered behind after class, who walked alone to lunch, who flinched when certain names were mentioned. The self-defense workshops grew so popular that the gym had to reserve extra time slots. And what began as a pilot program turned into a permanent, weekly course, co-sponsored by the PE department. Liana kept her presence steady and humble. She never advertised, never boasted, but her consistency made her a quiet axis around which the culture began to pivot. Camilla, meanwhile, tried a few last gasps of influence. Whisper campaigns, funny anonymous posts, fake apologies that masked sarcasm with sweet tones. But they fell flat. Her words no longer stuck because fear had lost its grip. Even her closest allies began to peel away, not out of guilt necessarily, but because her power had stopped. 3 months after the relay, Liana stood at the edge of the auxiliary gym, arms folded, watching a row of students run through a basic escape drill. The spring sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long rectangles of light across the mats. It was the final session of the semester, and nearly 40 students had signed up, some who had once been targets, others who simply wanted to feel safer in their own skin. What struck Liana most was how they carried themselves now. Heads higher, backs straighter, laughter unforced. They weren't trying to become fighters. They were learning how not to be afraid. As the class ended, Coach Darnell gave her a rare grin and said, "You know, this place used to just be a room for second-period dodgeball." Liana gave a small smile. Now it's something else. Outside, the breeze lifted her hair as she walked toward the parking lot, where her uncle waited, leaning against his truck, arms crossed, proud but saying nothing. That was their way. She tossed her duffel in the back and climbed into the passenger seat. "You didn't just take them down," he said finally, as they pulled onto the main road. "You built something." Liana glanced out the window, watching the school grow smaller in the rear view. "Yeah," she said quietly, "and it's going to outlast me." She didn't need applause. She didn't need revenge. She had reshaped a place where she'd once been cornered, not with fists, but with patience, presence, and the power to say, "Not this time." And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching that the strongest people in the room are often the ones who never asked to be seen until the moment they decide to rise.